Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now let's start. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single prince in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. However, what is less universally acknowledged is that sometimes said prince might prefer a woman who can debate the merits of Aristotle over one who can merely embroider a handkerchief. The season of 1815 had commenced with its usual flurry of activity. Ambitious mamas polished their daughters' accomplishments like precious gems, hoping to catch the eye of the most eligible bachelor to grace London in decades, His Royal Highness, Prince Sebastian Oakley of Westmoreland. And yes, dear listener, while Westmoreland is not traditionally a principality, for our purposes, let us agree that in this corner of England, royal blood flowed through the Oakley line, distant cousins to the crown itself. The Tuns certainly didn't question it, not when the prince possessed both looks and a fortune estimated at £30,000 per annum. "He's positively divine," sighed Lady Featherington to the Countess of Matlock as they watched Prince Sebastian cross the ballroom at Almack's. "Such noble bearing." "Indeed," replied the Countess, fanning herself vigorously though the room was hardly warm. "And still unmarried at 28. My Amelia would suit him perfectly." What neither lady knew, what nobody knew, in fact, was that Prince Sebastian had developed a most peculiar habit. Each night, after the endless parade of balls and soirees had concluded, he would don simple clothing and walk the grounds of whatever estate hosted him, seeking respite from the suffocating attention of the marriage mart. And it was on just such a night, while staying at the Earl of Huntington's country estate for a week-long house party, that our story truly begins. The prince had escaped to the gardens following a particularly tedious musicale featuring no fewer than 3 young ladies murdering Mozart on the pianoforte. The cool night air was a balm to his frayed nerves. As he wandered toward the east wing of the mansion, a curious glow caught his attention, a faint light flickering from what he knew to be the library. "Most peculiar," he murmured to himself. "The hour must be well past midnight." Curiosity piqued, Sebastian approached the window. What he observed inside quite literally stopped him in his tracks. A young woman sat cross-legged on the floor, scandalous enough position for a lady, surrounded by a fortress of books. Her dark hair fell in a simple braid down her back, and she wore what appeared to be a servant's dress. Most remarkably, she read by the light of a single, contraband candle, holding it dangerously close to an ancient-looking tome while frantically scribbling notes with her free hand. Now, dear listener, it bears mentioning that libraries after dark were strictly forbidden in most great houses. Fire hazards, you understand. Yet here was this slip of a girl, risking dismissal or worse, all for the sake of knowledge. Sebastian watched, transfixed, as she mouthed the words silently to herself, occasionally pausing to note something in a small journal. When she reached what appeared to be a particularly vexing passage, she frowned, rubbed her eyes, and then, to Sebastian's utter astonishment, began arguing with the book. "Rousseau, you pompous fool," she whispered, though Sebastian could hear her through the slightly open window. "How dare you claim women's education should be limited to pleasing men? I should like to see you survive one day as a housemaid." The prince found himself chuckling before he could stop himself. The sound carried in the night air, and the young woman froze, her candle nearly slipping from her grasp. "Who's there?" she called, her voice soft but steady. Sebastian hesitated only briefly before stepping into view at the window. "My apologies for startling you. I was merely taking some air." The girl's eyes widened in recognition. Even in his simple evening attire, Prince Sebastian was unmistakable, his tall frame, aristocratic features, and the distinctive Oakley blue eyes were renowned throughout England. "Your Highness." She scrambled to her feet, nearly appending an inkwell in the process. I can explain. Can you?" Sebastian raised an eyebrow, enjoying her discomfort perhaps more than was gentlemanly. "Because I'm quite curious as to why one of Lord Huntington's maids is debating philosophy in his library at." He consulted his pocket watch. 1:30 in the morning. "I wasn't stealing anything," she said quickly. "I never suggested you were. Though you were stealing time, I suppose. And knowledge." His eyes danced with amusement. "Most serious crimes, indeed." She lifted her chin, and Sebastian was struck by the intelligence in her eyes. deep brown with flecks of gold caught in the candlelight. Knowledge should be free to all, Your Highness, not locked away for only those fortunate enough to be born to privilege. Ah, a revolutionary in Lord Huntington's library. Sebastian stepped through the French doors into the room, noting how she tensed but did not cower. And you are? Zara, she replied, then added somewhat reluctantly, Zara James. Just Zara James? No title or family connection to boast of? None whatsoever, sir. I am exactly what I appear to be, a housemaid. Astute listeners will note she offered no curtsy, an omission that would have horrified the ton had anyone of consequence witnessed it. Our prince, however, seemed more amused than offended. A housemaid who reads Rousseau, apparently to argue with him. Sebastian picked up one of the books. And Wollstonecraft? Heavens, Lord Huntington would have an apoplexy if he knew. Lord Huntington never visits his library, Zara replied with surprising confidence. His collection grows dusty while he grows portly at his dining table. Sebastian couldn't contain his laughter at her impertinence. How refreshingly honest, though perhaps not the wisest observation to share with a guest in your employer's home. Zara blanched, suddenly remembering herself. Forgive me, Your Highness. I spoke out of turn. On the contrary, Miss James. It's the first genuine statement I've heard since arriving in this house. He gestured to the books. How long have you been educating yourself this way? Her eyes lit with passion. Since I was 12, sir. I learned my letters from the cook at Thornfield Hall where I first worked. Then I discovered that great houses have libraries, and housemaids become invisible after dinner. Not entirely invisible, Sebastian pointed out with a wry smile. No, not tonight, she conceded. A grave error on my part. And what will you do with all this forbidden knowledge, Miss James? She hesitated, then squared her shoulders. I hope to become a governess one day. Perhaps even open a small school for girls. Noble aspirations. Not noble at all, Your Highness. Practical. Necessary. Sebastian studied her more carefully. In the candlelight, he could see that despite her simple dress and station, Zara James possessed a natural grace and beauty that many of the diamond debutantes threw at him lacked. Her features were striking rather than conventionally pretty. Intelligent eyes, a determined mouth, high cheekbones that suggested foreign ancestry, perhaps a generation or two back. I shall leave you to your studies, Miss James, he finally said, backing toward the door. Though I recommend extinguishing that candle soon. The household rises early. Relief flooded her face. You won't tell Lord Huntington? Your secret is safe, he assured her. Though perhaps choose less inflammatory reading material next time. As he turned to go, curiosity got the better of him. One question, if I may. What made you risk your position for Rousseau, of all people, when you clearly disagree with him? Zara smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed her face entirely. To defeat one's enemy, Your Highness, one must first understand him thoroughly. Sebastian departed with her words echoing in his mind, unaware that this chance encounter would set in motion events that would scandalize the ton for months to come. The following morning, as dawn broke over the Huntington estate, the prince found himself seeking out his host in the breakfast room. Huntington, he began casually while buttering a piece of toast. I was wondering if I might borrow your secretary today. I have some correspondence that requires attention. Of course, Your Highness. Lord Huntington nearly choked on his tea in his eagerness to accommodate. Perkins is entirely at your disposal. Excellent. And I shall require a space to work. Your library, perhaps. And so it was that an hour later, Sebastian sat at Lord Huntington's massive mahogany desk, pretending to dictate letters while actually scanning the room for any sign of the mysterious Zara James. His patience was rewarded when she entered, feather duster in hand, then froze upon seeing him. Good morning, Miss James, he said pleasantly. Perkins, the secretary, looked up in confusion. You know the housemaid, Your Highness? Miss James assisted me with locating a book last evening, Sebastian replied smoothly. She seemed quite knowledgeable about the library's organization. Zara curtsied properly this time, eyes downcast. I merely dust the shelves, Your Highness. Indeed? Then perhaps you could direct me to Lord Huntington's collection on natural philosophy while you're here. I have a particular interest in astronomy. The secretary frowned. I could fetch a footman to assist. That won't be necessary, Sebastian interrupted. Miss James will do admirably. You may continue with those letters, Perkins. Oh, how the tongue would have tittered to see a prince of the realm conversing with a housemaid. But remember, dear listener, our Sebastian had grown weary of predictable society, misses with their practiced smiles, and carefully rehearsed opinions. Once Perkins was absorbed in his task, Sebastian followed Zara to a far corner of the library. You're making him suspicious, she whispered, gesturing toward the secretary. Let him be suspicious, Sebastian replied. I am a prince, after all. We're known for our eccentricities. Is there actually a book you require, or was this merely an excuse to torment me further? Sebastian grinned. Both, perhaps. I am genuinely interested in astronomy, and in how a housemaid came to be so well-educated. Zara sighed, reaching for a volume on a high shelf. My father was a country schoolmaster before he died. My mother worked as a seamstress until consumption took her as well. I was fortunate enough to learn to read before being sent into service. I'm sorry for your losses. It was long ago. She handed him the book, Herschel's Catalogue of Nebulae. Will that suffice, Your Highness? Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Sebastian was surprised by the jolt of awareness that shot through him. Perfectly, he managed. Though I find myself more interested in your opinions of Rousseau this morning than in Herschel's nebulae. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. That would be highly inappropriate, sir. More inappropriate than arguing with dead philosophers in someone else's library at midnight. Her eyes flashed with that same intelligence that had captivated him the night before. Perhaps we are both breaking rules, then. You by speaking to a servant as an equal, and I by forgetting my place. Rules, Sebastian mused, are often made by those who wish to maintain their advantage over others. A revolutionary sentiment from a prince. Even princes can recognize injustice, Miss James. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lady Huntington, who swept into the library with her daughter, Miss Cordelia Huntington, in tow. Your Highness, we've been searching everywhere for you, Lady Huntington exclaimed. Cordelia is to play the pianoforte in the music room, and we would be honored by your presence. Sebastian suppressed a sigh. How delightful. I shall join you momentarily. As the ladies departed, he turned back to Zara, who had already retreated into her role, dusting silently with downcast eyes. Tonight, he said quietly. Same time, same place. She looked up, startled. That would be most unwise, Your Highness. Undoubtedly. Will you come anyway? After a moment's hesitation, she nodded almost imperceptibly before hurrying from the room. Now, dear listener, I need not tell you that what followed was the most scandalous secret friendship the Ton never knew about. For 6 consecutive nights, while the Huntington house party continued its endless round of entertainments, Prince Sebastian Oakley met Zara James in the library for discussions that would have shocked society to its core. They debated philosophy, literature, politics, and astronomy, the prince finding in this unlikely companion the intellectual stimulation he had long craved. For her part, Zara discovered that nobility of birth did not necessarily equate to nobility of mind, though in Sebastian's case, she grudgingly admitted he possessed both. On the 7th night, disaster struck. Lady Penelope Fairchild, a determined debutante who had set her cap for the prince, noticed his absence from the card room and took it upon herself to seek him out. Following a whispered tip from a footman who had observed the prince's nightly wanderings, she made her way to the library and flung open the door without knocking. The sight that greeted her was shocking indeed, not because of any impropriety, but because of its intimacy. The prince and the housemaid sat on opposite sides of a chessboard, heads bent in concentration, engaged in animated conversation about the political situation in France. Lady Penelope's scream of outrage brought the entire household running. A servant, consorting with a prince, she cried, pointing an accusing finger at Zara, who had jumped to her feet, her face ashen. Lord Huntington turned purple with rage. What is the meaning of this? James, you are dismissed without references. How dare you impose yourself on His Highness? She did nothing of the sort, Sebastian interjected coldly, rising to his full height. I requested Miss James's company. A horrified silence fell over the assembled crowd. Lady Huntington looked as though she might faint. The other house guests exchanged scandalized glances. For chess, Your Highness? Lord Huntington asked weakly. For conversation, Sebastian replied. Miss James is remarkably well read for someone of her station. I found her insights on Rousseau particularly illuminating. If possible, the silence grew even more profound. A housemaid discussing Rousseau with a prince? It was beyond comprehension. This is most irregular, the Earl finally managed. Perhaps your Highness would prefer to return to the drawing room while we deal with this situation. Sebastian's eyes hardened. There is no situation to deal with, Huntington. Miss James has done nothing wrong. She has forgotten her place. Lady Penelope hissed. And what place would that be? Sebastian asked softly, dangerously. Below your notice? Unworthy of basic human dignity or conversation. Zara stepped forward then, her composure admirable under the circumstances. Your Highness, please. I thank you for your defense, but I accept my dismissal. It was foolish of me to imagine I could step beyond my station, even briefly. She curtsied, first to the prince, then to Lord Huntington, and made to leave the room. Stop, Sebastian commanded, his voice ringing with authority. No one is dismissing anyone tonight. Lord Huntington, I believe you owe Miss James an apology. Ah, dear listener, can you imagine the collective gasp of the ton at this statement? A prince demanding an earl apologize to a servant? Unprecedented. That is to say, Lord Huntington sputtered, caught between outrage and the desire to please royalty. Sebastian didn't wait for his response. Miss James, please accompany me to the terrace. We have matters to discuss. Without waiting for permission, he offered his arm to the bewildered housemaid and led her through the French doors into the garden, leaving a stunned audience behind. Once they were alone in the moonlight, Zara pulled her arm free. Have you lost your mind? You've just destroyed what little chance I had of securing another position. No one will hire a housemaid who caused such a scandal. I have no intention of letting you work as a housemaid ever again, Sebastian replied calmly. What? Do you propose to ruin me completely then? Anger flashed in her eyes. I may be of low birth, your Highness, but I have my pride and my reputation. Zara, he said gently, using her given name for the first time, I propose to marry you. She stared at him as if he had suddenly sprouted a second head. That is not amusing. It wasn't meant to be. I am perfectly serious. You cannot marry a housemaid. The scandal would be unprecedented. The crown would never permit it. Sebastian smiled. As it happens, my particular branch of royalty allows for some flexibility in these matters. My grandfather married a merchant's daughter, to everyone's horror. The family survived. This is madness, she whispered. We've known each other a week, in which time I've learned more about you than I have about any of the debutantes I've danced with for 3 seasons. I know your mind, Zara James. I know your heart. I know you're the most remarkable woman I've ever encountered. The ton will never accept me. The ton will do as I say, or they will find themselves without invitations to Oakley Court. He took her hands in his. I'm not proposing out of pity or rebellion. I'm proposing because in you, I've found what I never thought possible, an equal. Someone who challenges me, who sees me as a man rather than a title. Zara's eyes filled with tears. You could have any woman in England. And I choose you, if you'll have me. For once, the quick-witted Zara found herself speechless. Sebastian pressed his advantage. Think of the good we could do together. That school for girls you dream of? As my princess, you could establish a dozen. Education for all, regardless of birth or circumstance. Isn't that worth braving a few scandalized dowagers? A smile trembled on her lips. You fight unfairly, your Highness. Sebastian, he corrected. If you're to be my wife, you should use my name. Sebastian, she whispered, testing the feel of it. You realize people will say you've lost your mind? Let them. My mind is perfectly intact. It's my heart that's been captured. And there, under the same stars they had discussed during their midnight conversations, Prince Sebastian Oakley dropped to one knee before the housemaid who had dared to argue with Rousseau. Zara James, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife, my princess, and my partner in all things? Now, dear listener, I shall leave it to your imagination to picture the scene that followed when the prince and his intended returned to the library, hand in hand, to announce their engagement. Suffice it to say, Lady Huntington did indeed faint. Lady Penelope had to be escorted from the room in hysterics, and Lord Huntington found himself suddenly remembering urgent business in London the very next morning. The scandal, as predicted, was magnificent. The gossip sheets could speak of nothing else for months. Prince weds housemaid in unprecedented alliance. Former servant, now Princess of Westmoreland. Society in uproar. Revolutionary royal. Prince Sebastian breaks with tradition. But what the gossips failed to capture was the genuine love that had blossomed between the unlikely pair. Or how, on their wedding day, Prince Sebastian presented his bride with a first edition of Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, inscribed with the words, "To my Zara, who needed no vindication, only recognition." Within a year of their marriage, Princess Zara established the first of many schools for girls of all social classes, where the curriculum included not only the traditional feminine accomplishments, but also mathematics, sciences, and yes, philosophy. Even Rousseau, though his works were taught with a decidedly critical eye. And if, in later years, the Ton whispered about how the Prince of Westmoreland could still be seen sneaking into his own library late at night to find his princess surrounded by books, debating politics and philosophy with the same passion as when they first met. Well, dear listener, such is the nature of true love. It begins in the most unexpected places and grows into something that even the most dedicated gossip cannot diminish. For in the end, it was not the prince who rescued the housemaid, but two kindred spirits who found in each other the rarest of treasures, a mind that understood and a heart that cherished them completely. And that, dear listener, is a happily ever after indeed.